Hey everyone, it looks like we've got two people in the Saito feed
Ready.
already, and looks like YouTube's coming up. I've worked out a much better flow for
Yeah.
getting YouTube kicked in. Good.
Hmm.
Sorry, when I look up there, I'm looking at the YouTube window, YouTube studio. All right, we're live on both YouTube and Swarmcast. Welcome everybody to Saito Summer 12, or our just regular update as it now pretty much is. It's good to be here. I think we've been teasing a little bit what we're going to be talking about today. So I think we probably just want to kick pretty much straight into it.
There's a lot to talk about. Jump in.
It's a big one. I think we might go a little bit longer today. We should be prepared to.
Yeah.
There's a lot to cover, and we've been kind of teasing a little bit of some kind of being excited about this. So let's get into it.
Let's start. First of all, thanks anyone in the community, the people. We've seen you active on Twitter. We've seen you active on Red Square. We've noticed more excitement. It's nice to see.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's noticing that there's more curiosity about what's happening. People are beginning to realize that there's more happening in the PKI space than in their little, DeFi speculative.
Yeah,
points.
Agree. I mean, it's been nice seeing old faces returning on YouTube, new people, and just a general increase in more vocalness from the stalwarts. So
yeah,
that's been positive. Red Square's been alive. And so, I think kicking off, basically what we'll do today, we'll break the format we've had a little bit previously with kind of catch up, a little bit of a drop, et cetera, and try and go up a level and look and say, we've done a bit of a tokenomics update, but these Saito Summer updates have been very much kind of a bit of a release and then some update chat. And go up that level and have a look at where we are on the roadmap, what all this means for the roadmap. A little bit of a review.
This is like Summer 12 or something. And it's like every week we're talking about the stuff. This is what we've released, and then these are the patches we've made. And it's easy, I think, for people to lose the big picture.
Yeah.
So it's been talk about the stuff.
Yeah, it's been really positive, I think, and it's been an improvement for us to be getting out there regularly. We like that, but I think it is time to have to step up and have a look at where that's gotten us. And also, we kind of in those weekly updates and stuff, we get into a cadence where they can kind of mess with the flow of releases and stuff like that. We've got to constantly be thinking also about the kind of what we're saying and what we release. But overall, I think it's been really, really positive.
So let's stay focused.
Yep.
Let's move forward. Our goal is to pull it up. We're going to start by talking, Richard, about where we are on the app level.
Yep.
Where we are on the roadmap.
Yep.
Where do you want to start us?
Well, I think let's just kick into. I mean, we've been talking amongst ourselves about where the app suite is and all the things we've been releasing. It's sort of what that all means and how it's coming together. But we haven't necessarily spoken about that strategically with people. So I think let's kick into a discussion of that.
So first thing we're going to talk about today. We've been giving you 10 to 12 weeks of Saito Summer releases with apps, with features. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pull back and we're going to look at where this is on the roadmap, why it's on the roadmap.
Yep.
And then let's do a quick app by app review of where they are and where they're going. Make sense?
Yep.
So where we are, you guys can check the roadmap. You can see we're the second era. It's the one where we're developing dog food.
Yep.
So the underlying goal with the applications is to build transaction volume, build an ecosystem that lets people hack up modules and incorporate them. It's kind of, you want the applications, they should be demos, but they should also be valuable and provide kind of bootstrapping for the network.
Yep.
So we've been porting our discussions over to Red Square, trying to move our community over.
Yep.
We've been working on things like building the apps to find out what the problems are, right? Like what issues do you actually run into, and making sure the Saito engine has the hooks. One of the big ones, for instance, is we see devs coming. We got an inquiry from someone and they were running into issues with like, how do I get this piece of data?
Yep.
And making sure that the system supports that and easily save transactions, load transactions. And so that's what the applications are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be giving us kind of a board on which people can push in apps. They're supposed to be helping us grow something so that as they get better and better, transaction volume grows. And they're supposed to be helping us figure out, by looking at the problems that we have, what problems Saito as a JavaScript library needs to solve to make it super easy to do this stuff.
Well, I think even through that, what challenges will developers face no matter what they're building on, but particularly if they're building on the Saito stack, and how do we have solutions we can point them at and say, this is the way we do it on Saito. This is the problem set you're going to face if you're working on your own. But we understand that ground really well. Yeah.
Well, like I'm thinking the next era 3, we're shifting into third parties on the network, third-party developers, stable data. And so we need to know the challenges that people are facing. A lot of the things I've noticed, because I sometimes get hit up by devs. We were recently hit up by someone, and weirdly, they weren't asking the right questions. I don't mean this critically, but as someone who does like the Saito PKI stuff, the big questions are like, okay, so where do you want the data to be? And what bits of the data need to be consistent across the network? And I think that's because people are just used to Infura. They're used to, well, I'll hit the API point and it will just return the truth, as opposed to like Red Square, where it's which version of the truth you want,
There's some society or government versus club analogy there. Like if you're all collaborating with all the users with each other, where does the data go? Who's responsible for it? How do you know who's done it?
Using it as an example of the dog fooding thing, in order for us to have a productive third era, we need answers to this sort of thing where we can say to a dev, without having a huge conversation about architecture, here's a function called load transaction. Put the SIG of the transaction here, you've got the data, right? Or the DCM stuff that we've done, when you build your module, compile it, give the transaction to anyone that you want to run the module, they're good. So this is
not forgetting things like third-party cryptos and also just Saito transfers, right? Dawn of Persistence has also meant we've gotten that stuff buttoned up, so you can use tokens in applications. Developers can easily see how to do that.
For sure. So all of this stuff, it's part of the dog fooding. It's figuring out, okay, the feature needs to exist, but it also needs to be easy to build with, and it needs to be easy to understand. And that's one of the subcategories for dog fooding. So that's what's supposed to come in Era 3. That's one of the reasons we're working on it. Where are we with the various apps? So let's do a quick rundown where the apps are in relation to all of these things. I'd say the first one, unexpected in a way, is Red Square. Because Red Square is also one of the newer apps. It's come because it was community pushed, and we've now got this social media platform. You want to start with Red Square?
I think it's gone through a couple of iterations, and it's given us some really key tech. There's some stuff we'll get back into later, but the infrastructure for communicating between peers for content, and then also community moderation and how you can even handle that kind of task as a group without a centralized authority. So it's been kind of revelatory on how to go to that rather than and take us away from some simpler models which had reliance on the node for data in a way that kind of was quite limited for what we wanted to achieve. So I think Red Square's shown that a huge amount is possible. I think it also got us the profile module and the idea of entities having keys and being first-class citizens on the network, because that can give us some of the features like topics, etc., that you have on sort of more traditional platforms. And I think with that, we might well be in need to rethink a little bit about how we work Red Square. It's a bit clunky on the inside because it's had some quite revolutionary bits and pieces added to it since the second iteration.
I think this is the risk of being way too abstract. I'm thinking of the apps in terms of, here's the stuff that we haven't done yet, and here's the stuff we've done. And I think everyone knows the stuff we've done. And I think kind of abstract discussions about decentralization, people can figure this out. We've gone from something that people can't use to something people can use. We've gone from something with no moderation functions to reasonably decent moderation functions. There are rough edges on all of it.
Barring one thing we've found recently, but
we've gone from not knowing what the UI needs to look at and what functions to, okay, well, these are the buttons you want on the front page. Things that I think the big things we've heard people talk about, people have talked about aesthetics less and less, interestingly, which is a sign I think the UI and UX dev is moving in the right direction. The second big thing I think that's not done, at some point when we refactor, we should come back and we should do a CSS cleanup. The second big thing is that if I'm offline and Richard joins Red Square, it's hard for him to get my tweets, right? So we've got the Swarmcast model coming out, which is totally new in crypto. And at the same time, though, if the swarm is consisting of browsers, a lot of the time, most of the swarm is off-chain. And one of the things that's happening to fill this in, work is being done on it, is something called the archive node and the profile, and it's connecting those two. So that your profile can potentially say, I have an archive node where my transactions are saved. And if you connect with me, I can give you access to that. So this is, I think, one of the big things that Red Square is moving towards. It's going to make friends more valuable. It's going to make the PKI network more valuable because even if Richard is off chain, his tweets and his curations and his likes get more valuable to me because we can rely more on the swarm for the default feed. So I'd say for Red Square, that's one of the big things that's outstanding. Is there anything else, Richard, outstanding that you'd flag as this is, because we've got to refactor at some point, clean up the tech debt. For me, that's a big one.
Yeah, I think that's really the last thing. It kind of comes into those topic ideas and stuff. We've always sort of said, well, topics make sense, but when? And it is about being able to get, if you have topics, you need to be able to get stuff when the people who are contributing aren't around. For instance, if there's three of you talking about something, you need to get the rest of the stuff you missed. So that kind of persistence or presence of data is something, is I think the biggest thing to really take Red Square to the next level.
I've got next category, I'd say App Store. I think this embodies the entire dev experience, and so I'm also going to include the wiki in this. Anyone who's been following the dev developments on Saito, you'll have noticed a lot of improvements to the wiki. You'll have noticed new tutorials that are coming out. We've got devs who are contacting us, and it's great. Like we're figuring out, oh, X has this problem, and that's because people are finally hitting this point in development where they're actually building stuff and running into issues. Dynamically compiled modules are big. We need a better infrastructure for how to get people to install them. But, and this is kind of related to the arcade too, but that sort of thing I'd say is kind of an app store usability.
Well, again, it's having the data around. So we've got the infrastructure for that, but it's getting it to people. Like you say, that there's some way of surfacing that, and then also great ways for devs to just make it available, right? So a way for devs to have a push this out so people can find it. It's that classic thing of just because you've got the tech doesn't mean it's in a package that people are going to warm to, and that's why I think calling it App Store makes that problem clear to people. It's like, you can write your app and just publish it by dragging it into place on the browser. But how do you solve all the 1,000 problems about distribution and people seeing a pretty picture of it so they know what it is, etc.
So the big technical stuff here, App Store, it's an abstract concept, but if we think of what it is that's standing in the way of usability on this growing, it's really data persistence, right? Because we can develop the apps, but then we need to find a way to make them continually available to people. And this is also, you're publishing to an archive node or you're publishing to a permanent chain. So chain permanence is going to be really important for getting the developer experience better in terms of you write an app, you upload it, and people can get it. So I'll move on from that. Let me say arcade. We've got more games coming out. The big game that hasn't come out, it's the community project Realms. I think we're looking for a community manager. There's no one in the community actually leading this and pushing this. So if you want to get involved, it's a great opportunity. The other games, we've been going through iterative updates. Settlers has gotten a lot better. That's Richard. You've done. You want to talk about that?
No, I think it's just it was one of those things we made some, a team made progress, and then we learned some stuff and we improved on that again, and it's a classic thing of change some of the gameplay, then the UI sucks because it's not kept up with those changes. You improve the UI and you start to see how you can make it better again. It's been through a good iteration of that. I really like some of the polish now, the pop-up messages and
here's
little
something
things.
new.
It plays well.
What I really love about what you've done is people won't notice this, but we shifted to have overlays, right? Like, hey, someone's got a VP, and people complained about that. And we now have, you've moved it into something where for some game functions, something will literally pop up from the HUD to notify you and then kind of scroll back down. And we love it so much. We've moved it. It's now part of the game engine. So any game can do this. And it's just another feature like the overlays, the HUD pop-ups, that what I love about it is it speeds up gaming. Because there's a bunch of uses where you want to call someone's attention to something, but having that overlay, all of a sudden everyone's clicking and it's so I really love this. So these kind of improvements are coming in. They're hitting Settlers, they're hitting the other games. TS is getting better. Here I Stand is getting better.
Well, we've got. And I think that one of the cool things is you can see, like I've had a look at it. You can see with Settlers that life cycle we talked about. We actually pushed users away a bit. Some of the things weren't where they needed to be, and then we've gotten strong usage again now that people have seen these improvements. So hopefully across the board, that's something we can get happening with games.
Yeah. We also had network issues. Interestingly, we had network issues this week as a result of some of the Swarm stuff, which highlighted a bug with the games that we only caught because of the degraded issues, which are now getting fixed.
Yeah.
So those are pending transactions. It's like you make a move, and then depending on the stability of your network and when you reload, things can go wrong. Fixed. So that kind of work is happening. But with the arcades, as this stuff, it's not going to stop. Saito Summer is going to continue. But the message here, I think, is we're looking at the trajectory of like aesthetic improvements to the games. A lot of the really fundamentally interesting things become things like the NFTs and also like transaction persistence, App Store and stuff. So, we can have tournaments moving towards that. The CSS improvements, the style improvements, but a lot of the really big stuff is going to be around the consensus changes that are happening in Rust. So it's kind of another area where the apps, we've got the trajectory, things are moving in the right direction, but the value of the Rust level work is actually rising as these other issues get sorted out. So I'd say that's arcade. And Wasm, I'll talk. And Wasm, the stuff is still happening. The work that's being done there is related to the archive modules. The archive modules need to be able to track ownership of data. So if you upload something to the network and it goes into an archive node, the archive nodes can be told this belongs to this key. And that's useful because then someone can publish a message that says, and it is now fully owned and fully controlled by this party to whom I've lent it or sold it. So that's archive node again. And the big issue there, again, it's persistence. Not necessarily token persistence, the data persistence. So that's kind of related to ATR and getting the chain to the point where the chain never stops. And Wasm,
sorry, I was just checking that the stream was working on YouTube because I saw an error. So we're just begging it.
So we got video comms. I'm really happy with the video comms. We're seeing growth.
Yep.
It continues to pull people away because they're used to Zoom, and then they're like, it's one click.
Not to be giving anything away, but I've been talking to more industry people recently than I had in prior few months, and it's really cool when you send people a Saito link to have a meeting with someone at at another project or whatever, and they're like, or an exchange, and they're really surprised. They're like, what? You have a product, like a product? So video calls were great for that. Yeah.
So I think there's some obvious stuff. Obviously, integration with pay to play is something that I think everybody wants, and this is just a dev issue. If someone in the community wants to pick this stuff up, it's great. We're an open source project, so if you like something, you want to see it, you don't need to wait for us. You could even do this kind of stuff with the DCM drag and drop module. Yeah. But I think that's something that we want to see happen. And again, it's like the Rust side of things is increasingly important in terms of where the apps need to continue to go.
Yeah, the roadblocks to a developer beyond tooling and information and stuff that we're working on actively is more and more about the actual existence of these persistent issues that we're talking about. So that's pointing us in a strong direction.
Last one I've got, maybe if people have questions, we can take them on specific apps. Last big one I want to flag is one of the sub goals that we've had for the past month has been getting rid of Saito.tech. The reason for that is we want to be tightening where the community is. We want to be tightening the stuff that's representing the community because no one's working on that old WordPress install. So people often will go and they'll be like, oh, it's outdated or it reflects badly on the project. It's like, well, wait till you see what it replaced. But getting rid of that and moving it, meaning we need the better splash page here on Saito.io. And partly we can take care of that. The big thing is the blog. And what we've got under development, which will drop sometime soonish, when we're ready for it with Saito Summer, is an actual blog module that runs on Saito. And this is going to be connected with the transaction archive stuff. It's connected with swarm casting because it's going to show people a really simple example of fat transactions loaded onto a profile archive. So if Richard's in my key list, I can connect to him, I can receive his blog post on chain, or I can fire off a request to his archive module and say, give me the transactions for his last post. So a decentralized version of kind of Google RSS.
This is cool in ways people might not be realizing, because I didn't realize this as well. But with data encryption and a public chain, you basically have a world where anyone who's got the ability to provide storage can just throw up an archive node and say, here's a great archive. It's close to you. It's fast, it's snappy. Use mine. And they can charge Saito fees for doing that. And it's a completely open marketplace. And the great thing is those guys can't lock you in either. So it's not like a Dropbox where they're like, 3 years in, you cannot leave. We've got you. And they can make the pricing and the terms of service whatever they like. The providers here are just providing storage. It's just binary storage. They have no idea what's going in and out because it's all encrypted. And so users will have competitors who actually have some of their data already. It's just encrypted. So the provider doesn't know it. But switching to someone else as your data provider, your archive provider, is super simple because you don't have to.
It's the Gmail Yahoo thing. It's public key. They're both using the same address, right?
Right. So yeah, it's like having a frictionless ability to move from Google Drive to Dropbox to whatever, because those guys can't actually. They're just providing the drives. They can't tell you what's where, and that's a brilliant model I think that we haven't seen elsewhere. It kind of makes me excited. Thinking,
well, I mean, we go with that. You geek out over the theory, and I'm like, okay, let's talk about specifics. For me, the big advantage is it gets rid of Saito.tech, and it's like the people that are complaining about that. It's like, okay, one, either submit a PR request.
I must complain to you. I hear nothing but praise, David.
I'm like, shut up. Like, we're working on it. Like, nobody wants to go and fix that website because why would we? We don't want it to exist. We want it basically to be the wiki. And then the network
the cool content and stuff there would be better placed on Saito.io. Things like the good diagrams and things like that we keep. Nobody needs WordPress in this day and age.
So that stuff is happening. The splash page is getting ported over, and we've got a blog module under development. The blog module does some really interesting things. It connects with the archive mode again. Like, you need to be able to load transactions is the function. It's the master function, and you can ask localhost, your own database. You can ask one of the peers on the network, and one of the new functionalities is the ability to try to load transactions from a public key. So it's making sure that the functions that we expose to the applications do what the applications need and do it in the easiest possible way. So I can say load transactions from Richard, and I provide his public key. And Saito is going to try to figure out, okay, well, where do I go to get Richard's stuff? You know, have I got it on chain? Have I been tracking it on chain?
Yes.
Or
if
no.
Dan's over there. Yeah.
I'm going to ask my archive nodes. They don't have it. Oh, but in the profile, he's specified his archive node. Let me connect to that and ask, or let me try. And so Saito basically behind the scenes is trying to figure all of this out and collect the data and give it to the application, whether that's Red Square, whether it's this blog module. The blog module might also make for a nice app store in ways, because, you know, saving and loading blog posts versus saving and loading a transaction that contains a digitally dynamically web, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's again, not to be too abstract, but it could be anything that's in there, right? It could be a short post and a large piece of content.
Yeah. So this has been maybe a bit of a, we can talk about any other applications. The point of going app by app is that there's kind of a theme. One, when you step back, you can kind of see where we're going. But you can also see that from the dog fooding perspective, we're moving towards a world where the token permanence, data permanence, archive permanence, transaction permanence is becoming more and more important for the applications themselves.
Yep. And for big uptake on those applications. Yep.
Yeah. More on this soon. We're going to come back to this. Let's talk a bit about where we are on Rust, because we almost never talk about Rust in the Saito Summer updates.
Yep.
Because it's confusing and it's low level. And we're driving.
And we want to stay in a good relationship with Sanka, who's leading that stuff.
Yeah, it's rough. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening on Rust. We want to talk about it very briefly. We've mentioned in passing security at low transaction volume.
Yeah.
This is big. It's important for us because we can't drive transaction volume high enough, fast enough. So we need to add this so that anyone who joyrides the chain basically bleeds out. So we've got that implemented.
Yep.
And I think we have tests for that. I think it might already be live.
It's already live. It's just set to 0 at the moment. So the code is there, but it's checking that you have a balance of at least 0 to make a block right now. So, and we've tested it with integer numbers, and it's functioning.
Okay.
Yeah.
So security at low transaction volume, that work is ongoing. ATR, we've recently done a bunch of work with ATR. If you actually take a look at the block, there's a bunch of new variables. We've had 2 rounds of consensus improvements. And what they're doing is a couple of things. One of the big things is they're cleaning up the language of the code base. They're imposing order on sometimes chaotically named things. For instance, we have the variable total fees, which has historically been used to refer to various things, right? Like, well, is this the total fees in the block? Is it the total fees from new transactions? Is it the total fees from new transactions and the ATR transactions? And the naming has historically been somewhat chaotic because this stuff has been added over time. So rationalizing that, which also means that one of the reasons we're doing it is to make sure ATR is working perfectly for this permanent loop. We want to make sure that all of the math adds up. The tokens are going in the right place. We're not having permanent ATR cycle where tokens are leaking in or tokens are leaking out. So there are consensus improvements there with ATR. We've got a module called the ATR, which we're also using to debug and do testing. And so what that is it's a module that you can load as a dev, and it will literally show you where all of the tokens are. You can add transactions to the mempool and say, give me a block, or give me a block with a golden ticket. And you can manually look through and visually confirm, if the averages change, what should I see? And then you do it, and you're like, okay, we do see it. So that's ATR. So that's work to improve the Rust code base so that it's a lot clearer, but also so that we can build more tests to be sure that this is working. Richard, you want to go off about actually, we'll leave this. Let's keep going.
Let's move on.
NFT updates, we've got them in a branch. It's something called a bound UTXO, where basically there's going to be a UTXO. If you create an NFT, you're creating a special kind of UTXO that is bound to another UTXO that has fees.
Yep.
And so the UTXO that has fees, this one has to go where this one goes.
Yeah.
So we've got this NFT object that is bought and sold, and it moves together with this other thing, which is where the word bound comes from.
Yeah.
So
I think not to underplay that. That's new. It's not a way that this is being achieved elsewhere, and it has some massive advantages. One is it's so much lighter and will be way cheaper for users than any of the EVM type NFTs. It's a lot better solution in terms of just cost and effort. And the other one is because you've got fees associated, you can have essentially tokenization. You can have split NFTs. So you can have an NFT with 1,000 equal parts, and that means or a billion. That gives it power beyond the simple. I've got an NFT and I have to spend $40 in ETH to
these need to move together, but that means if they do move together, they can split. And if you have two of them, which would be four UTXO, they can move together to merge, and you're back to two.
Yeah.
It's there's testing involved with this. It's things like the amount, which is normally tracking Saito tokens, is now tracking potentially this third party token or something.
Yeah.
So that stuff is happening. It's called bound NFTs. If you've been tracking Dev, you can see the pushes, you can see the branch. We've been working on this, pushing it up. We've mentioned, why are we doing NFTs now? It's because we want to get this stuff done before we get the ATR testing finalized. Because if we've got stuff splitting and merging, we want to make sure that it works. We don't want to add this later to a dynamic chain that we can't reset.
Yeah.
So bound UFTs, NFTs, and then the last two really work on transaction persistence is really app level.
Yeah.
Although we've now got the instability that we had this week, worth mentioning is because Rust is now hooked up so that even if we are browsers, that data channel that we can create between browsers can now be upgraded so that Rust treats it like it's a core connection between me and the server.
Yeah.
So previously we had kind of two tiers of peer-to-peer connection. There's me with the server and me with the DNS server, me with some other server, and then there's our swarm connections. And now the swarm connections can actually be pushed down into the Rust layer, where Rust says, oh, it's my peer on the blockchain.
Yeah.
So if I connect to Richard, I can send him transactions, and it's a first-class connection.
Yeah.
And that's important too. Bound UTXO could also mean escrow. Maybe let's get to questions at the end.
Yeah.
So there's the token persistence. We're a bit further ahead of where we need to be on the curve, but of course this matters, right? Because it's connected to things like pay to play on Saito video chat. It's easier if we can do it with Saito.
Yeah.
So that's where apps are, and that's where Rust is. Both are moving along.
Yeah.
I think people have more visibility into the apps than Rust. But the big message for today, I think, that I'd like to communicate is on the team level, we're looking at as the app's utility grows and as we move further along, we're getting to the point where this data persistence part of the network layer, Rust layer, the data layer, is more and more important for the dog fooding and dev work we need to do.
Well, I think it's also pat ourselves on the back a little bit. As the unsolved number of problems is getting smaller and smaller, we're seeing the need for this persistence as well. Yeah.
So the kind of the roadmap update, we're getting through we've got the focus says shift to emphasis on Rust.
Yeah.
It's not really a shift of emphasis, but what we're doing is more dev work over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks has kind of gone into Rust because we've noticed that Rust has been blocking some of the application's effort. And so what we wanted to talk about this week is we wanted to let you guys know this, first of all, because we may see it in the future with Saito Summer. Meaning we've got a bunch of stuff queued. But, historically we've kind of worried, we want to make sure we announce this week, because there's more development work on Rust, it might mean that the variance in the pace of when things hit for Saito Summer, it might be like 14 days one week and then 10 days the next. That's just because this stuff, the Rust stuff, is kind of harder to...
The arcs are bigger.
Like, big stuff happens and nobody notices because nothing breaks.
That's often it is often changing the wheels on a moving train, or upgrading the wheels on a moving train. And so when nothing explodes, it's a massive engineering feat and nobody cares.
But we think it would be a very underwhelming Saito Summer if we're like, and nothing happened.
We didn't break anything.
Right. So I think so. The first message is we're like the roadmap update. I think it's communicating where we are. I think people get it. This is what you're going to see a bit more from us going forward. Saito Summer is still happening. It's still ongoing. We've got a bunch of stuff still queued. If you got ideas, you want to see them, tutorials, all of this stuff, please keep it coming. Still got devs working on this, but a lot of core effort is moving towards things that may be a bit more hidden in the background. A lot of the emphasis on the app layer is also on things that involve data persistence as well as token persistence. So that's foundational things like load transactions. Does it work? Getting these peer-to-peer data layers, right? Like if I connect with Richard and he's offline, can I still access content if he wants me to by saying, I'm not here, but you could try this server. Anything you want to add on this one?
Well, and also just the realities of trying to connect with, like, work out, should I be grabbing that off the chain or off a peer? Like where's the best place to look for the data if it's got multiple locations? So how we actually make that work.
Well, I mean, people are used to just I want the API key to Infura. They don't. So like I've noticed devs don't even think about this. Where's the data? It's just I'm building an app. So where does this get to us with the roadmap? Because I think we called it roadmap update. I think what it means is what you'll see is you're going to see more focus on the Rust and the token persistence work in terms of core dev for the next 2 months or so. I don't know, like maybe continue. We'll see what happens, and we're going to see how this work kicks up to the application there. We actually feel that we are slightly ahead of the curve on token persistence itself. With the volume. If it does well, we would love to be able to accelerate that. We're not making any promises yet, because God knows what happens. But we've got also a bunch of really interesting ideas about how to accelerate this. For instance, like actually putting production into a kind of a hyperloop.
I've been calling it turbo mode just because I love the idea of having the old original desktop PCs where you had a button that said turbo. I never owned a PC that was good enough that it seemed to make a difference. But I had turbo buttons. I never noticed the difference. But the point... What's that?
Dude, you cannot run GTA 1 on normal mode on a 486. Telling you.
I was still being eaten by things in mazes in text mode at that point. But yeah, the point is, and this is I think a lot of what was really exciting me about this update is going back to the roadmap and looking at actually, how accurate things that were predictions were, and how well it describes where we're at, and then that change in kind of emphasis David was talking about. Is it an emphasis on dev, etc.? I think it's really a change in the reality for us that we're moving into putting more stuff in front of devs, being more actively pursuing people building, and having much better options for people to do that, new tooling and stuff. But just this emphasis on persistence is getting us to the point where we can get devs in place and saying, here's how you can build apps that can make you money. Here's how you can build apps that will get you fans.
Here's how you can build apps that are available for people to install.
And at the same time, that to me looks like we can maybe have that on a much shorter timeline than we thought, because of security at low volume was kind of one leg. And I think falling into place is this ability to just thinking through how we can speed up testing, probably by having shorter epochs. So just run a shorter chain, looping harder and faster. That will surface any issues quicker, and that will give us certainty to be able to move the token persistence curve forward with confidence. Should all go well. So we're not going to promise the world if we may have issues, but it will surface those issues faster, and we'll be able to get through them quicker. And that ability to accelerate into this next era a lot faster than we thought is really exciting for me, because it's giving us much better horizons, I think.
It's the token persistence is also data persistence, right? Yeah. Because one of the easiest ways to get your data, your transactions out to people is to push them on chain.
Yeah.
So if we're resetting the chain, then we're either managing multiple data stores, which we don't want to do, or we're saying, look, here's the standard for it. You put it on chain, you pay the fee, it keeps rotating, and then it's just available. Right. So we want to do these for our apps. We want to do them for our blog posts. Right, it's part of the dog fooding process, and we want to get rid of things like the WordPress that are off on the edges. I think people have noticed we're already de-emphasizing Telegram. It's like if you've got questions or you want to really know what's coming, come on to Red Square.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a ton of work that needs to be done on all fronts.
Yeah.
But that's where we are, and I think we're looking to figure out how viable it is speeding things up with the ATR turbo mode, Hyperloop, whatever, and
Hyper turbo loop mode.
Isn't that like Elon Musk's thing? Like
it was one of the things people forget as one of his terrible ideas. It doesn't work, but
is it a terrible idea, or is it just expensive?
High-speed rail is a great idea. That was a bad way of doing it.
No, but it's in a vacuum, right?
Yeah, it's a vacuum tube thing. You can just do maglev. It's fine.
I think somebody could build it, you know?
Yeah. Back to Saito. I think the thing we'd sort of like to say is we are seeing a shift in the eras, a changing of the eras. I think we can kind of call that as observers from here. Mm-hmm. And we're hoping early December, but definitely before end of year to be able to make a call on whether we can accelerate that token persistence curve. And I think that's a really exciting prospect for us. Something we hadn't anticipated, but it's come from, I think, understanding this coalescence of persistence of token and data being needed, but then also the work on security at low volume and just how we can test it.
It's the step-by-step stuff adding up, you know? Like it's easier. The better stuff gets, the easier it is to make the changes that are needed. Yeah. Like a lot of the cleaning up of the language, it's so that we can implement this stuff easily and we can confirm like block creation and block validation. We've got to make sure that all of the variables are checking and testing exactly the right thing.
Yeah.
That's where the total fees confusion coming is. Wait a minute, we actually had one that wasn't checking the right thing. It was being set with one variable and it was confirming with something that was slightly different that would cause a problem in one edge case with ATR.
Yeah. That's why we need that thousands of loops of the chain to be certain, and the idea that we can actually do that in weeks or months rather than a year or so is super exciting. I think it gives us a much better alignment as well with things like the work on dev docs and stuff, and the increase we're seeing in building as well to actually start working with people on pushing third-party apps out that really have bite.
Like simplification too. For me, it was that change with archive nodes. I think it was 3 months ago.
Yeah,
where we announced it or something, where it was like, okay, you can now fetch stuff from your local archive node or the server, and it's the same language. And now we're using the same language again to check.
Right, universalizing that. Yeah.
Because third-party devs, it's challenging to get them to see. People say, what's the architecture for this? As if we've got some really strong opinion on how they should build their app. And it's like, no, we don't have an opinion on how you should build your app. We just want to make sure it's easy for you to do it regardless of what architecture you use.
Yep. And that you're actually achieving, something genuinely new and that isn't just a wrapper on the old school. You're not just creating a new Google for everybody out there using the old school methods, pretending that you're achieving something. So
AI on chain.
In a hyperloop. We've got people in chat. Should we? I think we've been at this for about 45 minutes. That's probably a good juncture to have a look at some questions.
Let's take questions quickly. I think for me, just the takeaway is people should expect a roadmap update.
Yeah.
Because we're moving towards the point where we're like, we're approaching the end of the dog fooding era. We're going to take a look at this and try to figure things up so we can give a more detailed timeline of era 3. And we know exactly when we move into it.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. There's a ton of progress. Questions are welcome. And if you're listening to this after the fact, feel welcome to come to Red Square and ask us questions there or engage. Yeah. Or if you have nothing to do and you want to help.
Yep. I'm just punching in some checks if anyone's got questions for us in different forums.
I see one, the question Mino asked here in the on-chain chat says, bound UTX could also mean escrow functionality. One thing that, is it happening? Is it not happening? There's been a community initiative to do things like define how to do multi-sig. And it was kind of happening and then it was kind of not happening. And we're not quite sure. It hasn't hit the point where it's priority enough for us to be like, this is what we should do. Because on our roadmap, multi-sig is way at the end. It might happen. If it does happen, we'd love to add it. At that point, multi-sig is like multiple keys you can sign and then you confirm. So as soon as you've got that, bound NFTs can be multi-sig as well.
Yeah. Because
you've still got one address controlling it, but you've got multiple keys that can sign to move from that address. So we could also do multi-sig in a messy way using the same sort of, here's the new transaction type, but
I can't see that chat for some reason at the moment. It's appearing below my window.
The only
one question in YouTube, just on the progress with LCX. Things are moving along. We've had a couple of to's and fro's with on email about legals and other things, and I'm hoping to have a call with them tomorrow or on Monday about next steps and wrapping all that up and getting moving. So that's positively moving forward. Any other plans to have any other interviews? We'd love to. We've been flat out. I put out some feelers, but we'd love to have some more interviews, the likes we had with Dan or the Blake 3 guys. That was good. We'd love to do more of that. It was interesting.
I'd say on both. I mean, if you guys want to help set it up, that's great. I think for people we're talking to, what we're looking for is we're looking for something that's not, if we're talking to people, our goal is to establish credibility as people who are able to talk about the fundamentals.
Yeah.
So we don't approach talking with Dan as like, hey, let's talk about Saito. If you know, it might come in, routing work does this, and they get an enlightenment dawns or something. But our goal is people, and they're like, okay, the Saito guys are fair, and they're competent, and they're producing something that's useful.
Yeah.
It's kind of building credibility, so people will be like, well, maybe we should actually check out what they're doing.
Yeah.
At the same time, we do like learning too. So if we talk to other people, we're not really looking to talk to people who are doing like coin speculation and trading and like, what's your market strategy? How do you draw lines on a grid? I mean, that might be interesting, but it would be a different kind of conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what our goal is. If there's someone people want us to talk to, I'd love to, if it's a good conversation, maybe just ping us and be like, I can set up a call with this. Would you like me to try? And we'd probably say, yeah. For us talking with other people, we are, as always, when people want to talk to us about Saito, we are delighted to carve off the time. So one of the easiest ways to help us, you'll notice like the ETH podcast, all of that stuff. We are making progress on the academic front, by the way. But on the ETH side, like the mainstream crypto media, these people are in, like, it's like Groundhog Day, But does he see his shadow? Or yes, he sees his shadow and he runs back down. They're trapped. They're kind of running in circles. Consensus just laid off like 160 people, I think, too. And it's like, well, none of the people they laid off know how to solve their problems, but none of the people that they didn't lay off know how to solve their problems. Like that crypto media, it's not covering Saito. We are growing in a space that they don't know about. We're growing with a solution that they have no understanding of. And so we haven't broken out. We don't get those people saying, we actually would like to talk to you about routing SIGs. It's interesting.
Yeah.
If you know people who are interested and you can set that up, we would love to go and talk to people. Yeah. So on both of those fronts, you can help the project this way.
Yep. Got a question here. What do we expect at the conference, at the Dev Conflict? Dev Conflict is a precursor to the big ETH DevCon. One of the things that's interesting about it is it sets itself up to be a place to openly discuss the bigger problems in crypto and no holes barred, openness to new ideas, etc. There's a bunch of talks that we kind of slot in with, so it's a good place for David and I to go and Saito bomb, red pill people with ideas maybe they haven't heard before who are in the space. Get in front of people who think about these things. So it's a high target value rather than a vast one. And then DevCon's after that, so we'll be kind of cherry picking things to go and do, or drinks to have, and people we can bail up around that as well, where we can get some kind of genuine KOLs, people who actually influence thinking in the field, thinking about what we're talking about, etc. As well as addressing people in groups if we ask questions or push the project in a big room full of people. We're not talking 3 people, we're talking auditoriums. That's also really helpful in an environment where we'll come out looking good rather than not having the girl in the shortest skirt at our booth. So that's kind of my take on those 2 conferences that we're heading to.
I think the benefits that I can see coming out of it are actually for meeting people outside of the conference space. Mm-hmm. It's just that people will be in Bangkok. I'm in Bangkok. Richard is coming to Bangkok. And, in the outside, like, we're not going to shill Saito. We're not going to shill a token. We're there to literally spread knowledge and get people to understand, here's something new. You should care about it. As I think people know, like, I submitted a talk presentation. We got a rejection for that, which is fascinating because historically it's a disaster. It's a total disaster for ETH. They don't know how to solve their problem. I don't know if you guys are tracking what's actually happening, but we've now got the split with the validators. The community is kind of fragmenting. People are a bit pissed off at the EF. But the fundamental thing is they're not listening to the right people. They don't know how to solve the problems. We don't want to lean too much on the academic side, but there is progress coming towards something peer-reviewed that will actually break into, we hope, computer science circles, using the approaches that they take and say, no, these problems are broken and there is a solution and it's formally verifiable. Here it is. Yeah. And something that, having it framed as more of a traditional comp sci piece as opposed to economics piece, which is they don't understand it. So I don't see us inside the ETH conference context. We're not going to set up a booth and we're not going to sit there and be like, hey guys, come and play Here I Stand with us. We are going to be around. We're going to be talking to people. We're looking to connect to people. If you're in Bangkok, drop us a line.
Please, it'd be great to meet some more people, meet some citizens.
Yeah, maybe we can set up a meeting, go for Xinjiang food, or we could run an event.
Very specific option. Go to Dave's favorite restaurant.
I found a Xinjiang restaurant in Bangkok. This is beautiful.
Cool. A couple more questions. There are a couple of questions on finances, etc., in the YouTube channel. Maxime asking about runway and finances. I think first thing to say there is we have funding to execute the roadmap, right? When we're cautious with money, it's not because we are running out. It's because we want to make sure that we have enough to execute the roadmap. And that's why we're still here. If you look at the projects that we launched with when we did the IDO back in the day, almost all of them are dead in the water. Founders can't be found. We're not like that. So we're not in any trouble. We have the funding we have. It's not, like we say, we haven't raised $500 million, so we don't have 42 to give to whatever, dev thing to make up an app that isn't really going to do anything. we have to be very thoughtful, very strategic with what we have. People asking VC, would that be bad if we got some in? I think with the kind of changing of those areas that we're talking about, we do talk about incentives and things. We have Saito for that kind of purpose, whether that's we talked about faucets before, whether it's ads we're subsidizing on the network, or whether it's sales of those, would all need to be in service of the roadmap, right? We're not going to go and sell tokens to get a shiny office or something. It would have to be in service of the roadmap. So it's not like, we'd never do that, but we need to look at that incentive allocation that's there in the tokenomics for how does that push the network and the roadmap to success, right? That's the question. So not against VC at all, but we're not going to go and take VC money where we've got 3 months until they dump and we've got to execute some kind of Ponzi scheme out of the capital before then. That's not the game we play, but there are better options than the classic Web3 VCs out there.
VC is a misnomer in the same way that investment is a misnomer.
Yeah.
Most of the people who are going to buy a significant amount of tokens on a speculative basis are going to be looking to offload those within a year window, right? The people who don't are the people that have a long-term understanding of what we're doing. So, we're kind of mirroring a bunch of things. The important thing, as Richard said, is when we approach finances and funding, we're approaching them in the context of the roadmap. How do we make sure we can deliver on the roadmap, right? Historically, we have made funding available for people who've come and they've said, you should do this for marketing, you should do that for marketing. We've done it, right? I think what's interesting is people don't often know that. They're like, when marketing, why aren't you spending more money on this? And the answer is, it doesn't work. And if you look at the people who've done it, that's why they're dead. And we're seeing it interestingly, like ETH shrinking is part of this. We don't want to get too big and we don't want to get oversized unless it's in service of something the network needs. So yeah, like we'll look to raise funding if that's viable, but if we don't raise funding, we still have a viable roadmap. We're not going to spend $1 million raising on Binance though. I think we've been clear about that from the very beginning. And I think it's one of the nice things that's good about seeing the markets recently, because we get comments like that. People are energized, and they're beginning to realize the fact that all of the exchanges and the meme coin shit reflects badly on pretty much everyone, but it doesn't reflect badly on us. Yeah, which is nice.
Similarly, people are offshoring and just hiding what they're doing, but the restrictions on openly promoting volume support, i.e. wash trading as a market making scheme, that's actually helping us a lot, because when you talk to people in the industry who actually try and build projects and help people and think about things and they have a look at the volume on something like Saito, when you say that's actually organic, they're genuinely surprised, because most of the time people are dealing with projects that have zero organic. It's all it's all wash trading until they execute a pump. So for 3 days out of the 500 or 100 that the project's alive, they've actually got organic volume, and the rest of the time, it's mostly just machines moving the money around. That sort of stuff being scrutinized more is actually really good for us, because we look really good when people realize that's a real community out there, that's real trading volume, that's real activity and interest in what's being built, etc. The KOLs that support us have opinions and they're real, they're not paid shills, and that's a big support for us. And I think that the impact of that is growing. We need to look at then how do we accelerate that. Like, we don't want to sit there and say, well, that's fine, then that's all good enough. What else can we do? But we don't want to break that. We want to enhance it with whatever we do. Maxime asking, any hot leads from academics?
I don't want to spill the beans on it. I'll say that the big challenge with academics, I'm going to complain briefly about Tim Roughgarden in the way he play a game where there's a block producer who has slots to sell, and they're trying to prove that it's impossible to be optimal. Saito is optimal. It's provably optimal. The problem is it's optimal because of the fundamental reasons in economics that Leonid Hurwitz, Paul Samuelson were talking about in the 1950s and the 1970s. And when you get to these auction models, things start breaking because they do things like, assuming I'm the block producer and I need to fill my block with bids, they can demonstrate that, okay, we're going to assert that utility is here, but then people can kind of cheat to pay a lower fee. Or the block producer can kind of include fees to force everyone else to pay a higher fee. And the way they break it is related to the assumptions that they're making structuring how it's a market, how it's an auction, right? Like if someone pays a lower fee, the probability of this guy producing a block doesn't fall. So you just need to convince him to accept your fee. But if he accepts a lower fee, there's no consequence for you in terms of the utility that you get. Now, this sort of thing is how these computer science papers are written. What they're really doing is they think they're studying blockchain, but they then say, well, the blockchain is like an auction, like this. And then they conclude that the blockchain has the same limitations as the auction. And this isn't true. Like you notice in Saito, if someone pays a lowball fee, that reduces instantly the ability of the block producer to even make a block. So the forces that make things optimal with routing work are competitive pressures, both on the buyer side, but also on the block producer side. But people are approaching things from this auction design. That's what they understand. They don't really understand economics. And they're confusing themselves in a way, and so we are making progress there. I don't want to talk too much because there are challenges here. With the biggest challenge is you've got people who understand this very narrow thing with auction design, and they think that the thing that they're looking at is a blockchain, and fixing it is hard to fix because in a way because some of the things that in their auction model it just breaks, like. The ability of the block producer to produce a block breaks. If the fees get, like their models are assuming the fee goes down, well, you're just choosing the people to put in your block. It's a proof of stake mentality. We're going to give you the right to produce a block. With that right, you pick the transactions. This is very different than Saito. No one is guaranteed the right to produce a block. If you are not efficient at collecting high fees, you don't get to produce a block, and then you don't get to make money. And so these fundamental things that they're assuming break. Utility breaks as well. They're assuming that you get the same utility, like they say, well, the socially optimal fee level is this. And then can we play a game to pay a lower model? Because if we can pay a lower fee, we get this utility, but we also get a lower fee. It's not user incentive compatible, yada, yada, yada. Because I'm lying about my preferences. It's a misunderstanding of economics. It's a misunderstanding of like blockchain. It's weird.
I mean, that's the exciting thing to me is we're now having this discussion with, well, Dave is. I'm not pulling my weight there, but with academics who are publishing in the field, if we can get this put out there and published, and it is a rebuke to Tim Roughgarden and the industry for not paying attention to things that should be core to anyone in the field. But these are also people who consulted A16Z, et cetera, et cetera. And if we have people in Silicon Valley then reading these papers that are calling them out, this is a big step for us. This pushes us forward.
Saito is an unambiguous improvement on this stuff. I don't want to go too deeply into it, but there's all of this stuff that's wrong, like their assumption that you can pay a lower fee and you get lower utility. And right away, it's like, no, if you pay a lower fee, your transaction doesn't propagate as deep. And so they're modeling, they're saying utility is just inclusion in the blockchain. And it's binary. Either you get in or you don't. You want to pay the lowest fee that gets you in. But it's like, wait a minute, if you pay a lower fee, your transaction doesn't propagate as deeply. Your probability of inclusion goes down. And so there are these variables in the routing work model that they have explicitly removed because they're building these proof of stake auctions. And so, you know, it's not kind of pissing on the academics, but their understanding of things is fundamentally wrong. There's this wonderful paper by a guy named, I think it's Maskin. He's one of the big mechanism design people. And he actually comes out and he says, you know, look, mechanism design is not about getting people to tell you the truth about your utility. It's about getting what's socially optimal. And they should all go back and read this paper, because if you read the POS stuff, they're like, well, we're assuming that your utility is this. We want to design a mechanism that gets you to pay that really high fee. And it's like, no, that's not what mechanism design is supposed to do. The only reason, like this goes back to Samuelson, we have a paper on it, where the reason you want people to tell you the truth is that if you're in a public good setting that relies on a government to produce an optimal amount of stuff, the government needs to know the truth. But we're a decentralized network. There's no government. What we need to make sure is that the resources are spent optimally. But that means if you've got an incentive to lie, your incentive to lie should lead resources to be spent more optimally. And if you can accomplish that, you can get incentive compatibility. Anyway, we're making progress there. It's very interesting. Again, help is appreciated. We don't want to talk too much about it until stuff happens, but yeah, I'm optimistic that within a few years, people will take a look at all of the crap that's coming out of POS, and they're going to be like, why the hell did you assume that you could lower the fees people are paying and it wouldn't affect the utility of the people using the blockchain? Like and they'll be like, oh, well, if N is large, then, you're just cheating the security. And it's like, yeah, but the assumptions they're making are what are creating the structural problems for them. So the challenge for us, meanwhile, is taking this stuff that the computer scientists don't generally understand. And it's like, how can you help us put it into a kind of language that other people will understand? And how can we help you see where there are problems in the way you're approaching things? There's a real tendency among academics to try to assume that the probability of producing a block is constant. Because if they can't assume that, a lot of their models break. They can't calculate utility. And that's one of the problems with routing work, is that the probability of block production varies. If the probability of block production varies, the utility of inclusion varies too. What are you paying for? And it's like, what are you paying for in blockchain? Are you paying for inclusion in a block, or are you paying for fast inclusion in a block? Is it inclusion, or is it speed of inclusion? Right? And if it's speed of inclusion...
I'm still getting questions here.
Okay, I'll stop. Yeah.
Should we wrap up there?
I think people are tired of hearing me ramble.
No, time. +1 says Maxine. All right, guys. Thank you for your attention this evening. We hope you're as excited as we are about the roadmap and things coming up. We'll keep you updated as part of an endless ongoing Saito Summer, I suppose. Until the next time, see you then.